It is a very simple question. Should a member of the organization you lead be treated differently, in violation of the Constitution, I would add, based on their sex or the color of their skin?
No, I do not believe that, and that is
Okay.
why we have diversity, equity, and inclusion focus in the military.
Welcome to the Military Times Reporters Roundtable, where we bring you the inside news behind the headlines in the military community each week. I'm Leo Shane, Capitol Hill Bureau Chief for Military Times. With me again this week are Megan Myers, our Pentagon Bureau Chief, and Howard Altman, our Managing Editor. Thanks to both of you for joining in. I wanted to do something a little different this week, take a deeper dive into a story that we've covered. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Milley have been up on the Hill numerous times in recent weeks, talking to Congress about the budget, talking about Afghanistan. But I wanted to zero in on a recent appearance before the Senate Armed Services Committee in recent days, just to cover some of the headlines that I think didn't get as much public attention as those other ones. So, Megan, I know you've been writing a lot and focused a lot on this issue of how the military is going to prosecute sexual assaults moving ahead. We've had a lot of discussion about this in recent years, whether or not sexual assault cases, sexual harassment should be taken out of the chain of command, whether there should be an independent prosecutor who handles these. Where do things stand now? Because it seems like there's some really big changes on the way.
So the Pentagon stood up an independent review commission to look at this issue. They gave their first set of recommendations in April, and one of those was to take sexual assaults out of the chain of command, as well as sexual harassments and some hate crimes. That was their recommendation. And since then, Austin has gotten feedback from all of the service chiefs and the service secretaries, and is now mulling his final recommendations that he'll make to the president. What has changed recently is there's been more rhetoric around, okay, maybe we look at sexual assaults and sexual harassments and hate crimes. We're open to that idea. But on the Hill, the direction has moved very rapidly to supporting Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's bill, which would take a lot more high-level offenses, a lot of felonies out of the chain of command as well, murders, larceny, things like that. And that is something that the Defense Department is starting to push back on a little in testimony last week. Again, the secretary said, I'm open to this idea for sexual assault and sexual harassment because I think we've lost the trust of the troops on those. But I am, I'm reticent to throw every high-level crime into that bin and to take those out of the chain of command.
It's pretty astounding to see just how far the conversation has shifted, though. I mean, there was a lot of opposition to this idea of taking the sexual misconduct crimes out, and now we're talking about a much broader scope even, and it appears there's support for this on Capitol Hill. So, I mean, just how will the military deal with this if that's what they're served with?
I mean, if that's what they're served with, if that bill passes and the president signs it, then that is what it is. And they will, the JAG Corps will have to stand up some of these teams that will be trained on making these decisions. And then it will no longer be commanders who, levy charges and decide whether something goes to court martial. They'll, of course, figure it out. But I think they're going to make a pretty strong case, until the last minute to not do it this way, to just piecemeal take a few crimes out of the chain of command. And see how that goes.
Okay, another issue they're going to have to figure out deals with Guard and Reserve pay. Howard, I know you were following this. It came up in the hearing, the issue of just whether or not these part-time troops are getting paid for equitable work. We've seen a lot of cases where Guardsmen and Reservists have been mobilized, working alongside active duty folks, and getting different specialty pays, getting different hazard duty pays, things like that. Now the Pentagon's saying they'll look into it. How big of a deal is this?
Well, it's a huge deal, Leo. You have to remember, for a lot of these part-time troops, this hasn't been a part-time job. If you look back to the start of the pandemic, there were about 120,000 National Guard troops mobilized for that. Then there were thousands of troops mobilized for civil unrest, and then 26,000 Guard troops came to Washington, D.C. in the wake of the January 6th insurrection to protect the inauguration of Joe Biden. That's on top of 3,500 Guard troops who have been at the border and will be probably till September. And now it's June, it's hurricane season again. So that this has been a very extraordinary, busy time for folks who, in many cases, signed up for part-time duty. And because of the way things have rolled out, because of a lot of paperwork and bureaucracy. Folks are not getting the same pay and benefits that they would is with the regular active duty troops. So General Mark Milley, the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that the Pentagon is looking into this. They've have a commission working on this to find a way to have more equality between the Guard and Reserve and the active duty troops. And they've got a long way to go to make that happen.
Okay. One more issue from that Senate Armed Services Committee hearing that came up. There was a pretty testy exchange between Senator Tom Cotton and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin over the issue of racial equality, racial parity in the military. Megan, you wrote about this. Break down what was happening.
So basically goes back a year ago after George Floyd was murdered, and the response throughout the country and commensurately the response in the military, you know, among service members of color who have felt those same pressures, you know, that any Black person in America feels. And so during the last administration, some working groups and some studies were done about diversity and inclusion in the military, and that has carried through to this administration. And then a new facet was added after January 6th, when it became clear that not only were there current service members who were at the riot on the Capitol, but there were a lot of veterans, a lot of people who had served. And that really pricked the military's ears up to maybe we have an issue with, you know, latent extremism in the ranks, or with our veterans being recruited into these extremist groups, and we need to tackle that. And it kind of came to a head with Senator Tom Cotton and the Defense Secretary last week.
Mr. Secretary, do you believe that our military is a fundamentally racist organization? Yes or no, please.
Well, I won't give you a yes or no answer on that, Senator, because it deserves more than a yes or no. The military, like any organization, will have its challenges, but I do not believe it is a fundamentally racist organization.
Thank you. I'm sorry to cut you off, but our time is limited. I think it is a pretty simple question. I'm glad that you agree it is not fundamentally racist.
It was pretty shocking to see, you know, these very complex questions, right, that need a lot of explanation, just boiled down to these yes or no points, and nobody really got anywhere.
Well, one last thing before we go. I'm looking through my notes here and realized that we missed the Army's birthday last week, 246th birthday. So, Megan, what did you buy for the Army to celebrate?
What did I buy from the Army to celebrate? You know, I raised a glass. I raised a seltzer to the Army birthday. It's, you know, the service it predates America, actually, so they've got that going for them.
Howard, did you at least send a card or something? Come on, man.
Well, I just moved back to DC and I found some of my lovely coins here. The 101st, and it's the 260th birthday. So it's the 240th birthday. So this is a few years ago. So got my collection. Go Army.
All right. Well, look, we'll try and do better for the other services as they come up. Thanks to both my colleagues for joining us this week, and thanks to you for watching. Remember that you can follow all the biggest news in the military community all week long at militarytimes.com. We'll see you next time.